Let's start with a few ohms together. Is that okay? Bring yourself to a comfortable seat. Once you are settled into your upright seat, then you start to bring your awareness just below the navel. Second chakra, or across the pelvic floor, first chakra, or a combination of the two. And feel your breath moving in this space. And at the same time, be aware of your eyes getting very soft. Center of the brain, sixth chakra, the third eye, as well as the top of the head, seventh chakra. Eventually, we bring our consciousness down to the heart. We lift the energy of the pelvic floor up to the heart. If only in an imagination, you can visualize it, or just imagine, you can feel it, right? Use your imagination until you start to really feel it. Go with that. And that's part of bringing the palms together, right? Then you bring your heart meridians together as the palms come together to the beating heart. 3 ohms at your own pace. We don't have to do it all together. We can start together, exhale together at least. Inhale into that low belly. And namaste. Om Tat Sat. Any questions about anything we've gotten to so far? Yeah. Few more hours today, and then tomorrow is it. It'll be a short session. It's like half time tomorrow, right? When it's coming to 4. No. Cool. So it's all completely clear, obvious now, right? Clear as mud. So the Yin Yoga Sutras, let's just take a look. I always like to make sure that everything here is pretty clear, right? The purpose of yoga asana, that's the first one. Harmonize the flow of chi in the fascial channels. Oh yeah, maybe I can go ahead and drop that here. I was going to wait until the practice to kind of talk about it a little, but the modern meridian theory, which is also, there's something titled that, I think, in one of these pages, but you can look that over on your own and you'll see some of those terms like gel and sol. And that would be the next thing to go into, right? If we continued on that discussion earlier, the next place I would go with that talk would be that there is a theory, I guess I did say this earlier, there's a theory that the meridians are, the physical structures of them are, that's the fascia. So I said that earlier today, yesterday, I can't remember. But the meridians, the lines of energy, according to Chinese medicine, what acupuncture works upon, those lines of energy, are fascial channels. And there's, yeah, different, like I said, my teacher's teacher has been talking about that for a long time, about the gel sol quality of the fascia and how that's electrically conductive, is the water channels. So now maybe you understand when if I say, instead of saying that it's just saying that it's the fascial channels, if I say it's the meridians, these energy lines are structured water. That makes sense? Water structuring in a certain pattern where energy and consciousness can flow through it. And there's, there's different people now saying it. You were talking about a theory on that topic, which also included water. It was a slightly different sort of take on it, it seemed like, but that's good. And then there's people like, I brought her name up. I'm sure I'm butchering her last name. I think it's French or something, Helen or Langevin, to find that name. And she talks about it. She wrote an amazing article once called The Science of Stretch. And she's a mainstream scientist. She's not some weirdo scientist like my teacher's teacher, right? Who's also like a priest, a Shinto priest, like Japanese shaman stuff, as well as a yogi and many other things. He's eclectic in his ability to connect on this. So he's been talking about, he wrote a book called The Theories of the Chakras long ago, where he talks about that a bit, where he talks about chakras and the connection of the meridians to that. So again, chakras, meridians, one of them is a yogic idea, and one of it's a Chinese medicine idea, and he blends them together. But anyhow, and then she says, oh yeah, the science of stretch. She talks about how she's been studying how the needles, when you put that needle in there, at least some styles of acupuncture, they turn them a little bit. They do this little twisting thing. And she's got imaging of it now, even, and she can prove this, that as soon as you bring that needle in and you do that little twisting, it's like taking your fork on the spaghetti. It like the fascia will adhere to that and wrap around it. So when they're twisting it, they're pulling your fascia. It's just a gentle, tiny tug, right? It's like these subtle manipulations of the fascia. And so she's like, there's something to this. And there's something to this as far as how it's affecting the body and the nervous system and everything else. So that's pretty cool. But anyhow, that's it. That's the modern meridian theory, is that the channels of energy through your body are related to fascial lines. And And so now, oh yeah, that's what I was saying. In that first line, we see that that's even more of a loaded statement there. The purpose of yoga asana is to harmonize the flow of chi and the fascial channels. So that's why we put it that way, so that when we come to this point where we start talking about modern meridian theory, when you read that again on your own, you can come to that point and think about these folks who are out there talking about this. I will look up her name and write it up there later, Helen something. And and yeah, there's great little YouTube clips you can find with her too. I was just watching one on the plane over that I had seen before just to refresh myself on it. It's fantastic. She yeah, she works with rats. She gets her rats to do yoga. Yeah. Rats? So they're studying, yeah, they're studying on rats. So they'll do both like fascial manipulations on them, do a little massage on the little rats while they're sleeping, and they'll also do, it's really cool. I don't want to get stuck on this. It's going to take me away from where I want to go, but even while they're awake, they'll put their little claws on a bar, like a little tiny little ballet bar or something, and then they'll take their back legs and stretch them, and no, and she says yeah, she says they give into it. They love it. They'll relax. So they're doing, and she'll do it for long. She's not calling it yin yoga, but that's exactly what she's doing. So they're testing that. They're testing on the rats right now, like long held stretches and short stretches. And she's like, yeah, and she's talking about how the long held stretches are what matter, because it starts to manipulate the fascia, and she's looking into what that does to your immune system, what it does to your nervous system, or at least what it does with the rat's immune system, possibly similar to what it does to us. So check her out. So that's that first line. The 3 stresses. Now we have come back around to contraction. So I've discussed that probably as much as I'm really going to go into that. And we could certainly talk a whole lot more about it if we wanted to go into the dissection, into the analysis of yang practices, right? We don't have the time, so we'll stick with the yin and talk about some of the variations here now. But any questions about that? Is that cool? You feel okay about that now? Tension, contraction, compression, and how that at least relates to what we're talking about here. Cool. Yeah, and that's also why sometimes there's a time for that, you know. I'm fine with somebody intentionally doing a little engagement in their body when they're stretching for a long period of time. I don't care. There might be a reason for it. It might be a good thing for you. I just want to make sure that it's a conscious effort, that you're actually making that choice. You know, you're not just contracting and protecting something unconsciously. Open that space, let yourself into the joint, or just go ahead and give yourself a gentle contraction and feel that stretch along the muscle. That might be a nice thing to play with now as you're thinking about it in your poses, to feel that difference and where those stresses go. Then you have the 14 skeletal segments listed there. So you can do that dance at home. The 10 myofascial groups. Sure. Just contraction, pulling the joint together. That's what I was the last thing I put up on the board. Yeah, contraction. So, and of course, there's like putting yourself into tension while in contraction. That's when we would start talking more about yang yoga stuff too, right? That's why. So you're engaged. You know, you're often in yang yoga. You know, in your ashtanga, you want to be engaged. And now I'm pulling into it. I'm contracting to keep it out of the joints, to keep it into the more of the heart of the muscle. You know, there's a time for exposing your joints to stress, and there's a time for protecting your joints from stress. Huh? Yeah. What's the difference between when do you do which? Between what? Cool. Yeah, compression's pushing things together. So once again, I could be doing all those things at the same time in my body. I am, all the time. We're kind of, all these stresses are happening in the body to some degree. But yeah, you can think about, again, I'm contracting my hamstring muscle right now and then stretching it by pulling those tendinous areas apart. My sitting bone has an attachment of the hamstring, and my leg has one. Now I'm bringing my sitting bone back, so I'm stretching, but I'm contracting. So I'm putting myself in tension, trying to pull it apart, and then I'm also resisting that pull, contraction. The compression's happening maybe up here, different place, right? Now I'm pressing into this space. So that's what I mean by I'm doing all these things in my body on a regular basis, just everyday movements, you're doing all these things. So in yoga, we're just kind of like consciously trying to be aware of which of these stresses I'm placing on myself for the purpose of target area, functional objectives.
Just to be clear, so compression is like more the bone up.
No, compression's like, compression's anything like,
Any of the tissue.
yeah, like I'm here and my belly is squeezing into my thigh right now. So trim this up a little bit, lost that belly, and maybe I'd go a little further into it, because this tissue is squishing into this tissue. So yeah, you can have bone to bone compression, right? And sometimes that's when it starts to hurt, because you're starting to grind things together. But usually I think we're feeling soft tissue kind of getting squeezed between, or now we have the terminology, a gel. Most of the tissue in our body is, a gelatinous state. So you're squeezing this gel, and then you're releasing that gel and putting stress. Maybe this is a good time to get really clear on that. Gel and sol. How do you turn your gel into a sol? You turn your gel into a sol by changing temperature. And you change the temperature by cranking the heat up, or you change the temperature by creating a force on that space, and that will do it. So even compression into that space might be enough of a stress to elicit a certain amount of transition from gel to sol. Yeah. Thixotropy, I think that's the fancy word for it. It's when there's a word for it, the thixotropic effect. That's not going to help you in life in any way, but that's it. There's a word for it, right? When that shift happens. And that's what I'm suggesting that you feel. And that's why I was saying, I said this the other day, actually. I was like, Yin Yoga has this strange thing where I'm in it for a long time and things are opening up. Yet when I come out of the posture, I'm like, oh my God, everything's sore and I'm really stiff. It's like my spine's longer because I just opened everything up. But now, because of the stillness and the lack of movement, then all of that is kind of gelling together, And that's why I think that's why I personally try to emphasize this, like, okay, now let's do some gentle mobilizations, because you kind of just gelled yourself up, even though you just solved yourself up somewhere else. If that's even if I can turn that into a verb. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so that's part of, I think, what you're feeling is this change. And what you're also feeling is that when that fascia pulls apart like that, like I did with the Play-Doh here, it's not quite like that, right? The Play-Doh, it's going to stay like it is. It's not going to do anything else. But it's similar, right? That I stretch like that slowly. But the fascia, when you come back to the rebound, it's actually going to pull. It's going to pull back together. Not like that. It doesn't pull itself back together like that. It creeps back together. And that is, believe it or not, that's the technical term for it. It's the creep. So you're feeling the creep move through you. Partially, you're feeling that fascia coming back. And of course, that's going to affect your nervous system directly. When I say it's affecting your nervous system, the fascia is also coated around every nerve in your body. right? So the nerves are held together. It would be the exact same kind of tube discussion that we saw with the muscle. Tubes inside of tubes inside of tubes. Inside of the tube too, that's what we didn't get to. Like there's this nerve here and it's got layer after layer after layer of fascia inside of it, microscopic. So all that's pulling together. And so your nervous system is doing this thing and the water's moving through your body and everything's creeping together. And if you believe in such things, there's a movement of prana, which also would create certain sensations. Cool. We really, in the longer teacher trainings, we recite these sutras. So they're good things to kind of try to memorize. So it's helpful, because it's helpful to shorten up some conversations when you're talking to some people about what do you mean by this functional approach? Well, and then the response to that is, well, when you learn to see the body as 14 skeletal segments being moved by 10 myofascial groups, right? I can adapt these postures. You kind of change the wording a little bit to the conversation, but it's really helpful, I think, these sutras to like get straight to the heart of the matter when you're communicating with somebody who might be potentially a little triggered because you might be challenging their model, So it's one thing to have a system like this where it's like, okay, let's just go step by step through this foundation up, and then we can have that kind of conversation, more appropriate conversation around this stuff, and a healthy conversation. But sometimes you might be so excited about this information and you go to your friends who teach with a very different mentality and a different model, and they're like, wait a second. So this might be helpful for bringing that forward in a good way. And then you got your 7 archetypes, of course. And yeah, and then we have this another word we've made up. We say that flexibility refers to the extensibility. This is number 7. Flexibility refers to the extensibility of the myofascial groups, ligaments, joints, joint capsules, and discs. In other words, we're going to go ahead and say, when we use the word flexible, when I use the word flexible, you're flexible, I'm talking about that, the stretchiness of your tissues. And then, so we made up this next word, the first word on number 8, instead of flexibility, skeletability. Because that's not the stretchiness of your tissue if you have your wide open joints. So, I know people who can just go into the full splits. They don't do any stretching at all. It's just their bones are set up that way. They got these shallow joint capsule, the shallow hip sockets rather. And there's long next to the femur and they're set back, and that's just where their legs go. And there you go. So skeletability. Embrace the term. Compression, ultimate limit to the range of motion. That's been said. I think you get that. Every bone and every body is different. What is easy for one skeleton might be impossible for another. That's an important one. Not every posture. Another thing that we could say, every posture is bad for somebody. No matter what the variation, no matter what the shape, it's going to kill somebody. Maybe not kill them, all right? Maybe I'm getting a little dramatic. But they can potentially hurt themselves, or it's just wasting their time because it's not doing anything. It might be the best thing in the world for 99% of your class, and then one person's going to come in someday and be like, I don't get it. This doesn't, or well, this is terrible. It's killing me. It's hurting me. And in a functional, this is the next one, right? Yeah, 11. In a functional approach to yoga, there is no such thing as a perfect pose. So I think that's, something I think a lot of people will agree on. But then we do that next line to emphasize this even more. What we mean is every hand and foot position either helps or inhibits your ability to stress the target areas. So that's a good one to memorize too, because then when a student says, where is my foot supposed to point? I don't know. How could I possibly know? All I know is that every position that you put that foot is either going to help you. I already told you the target area. Do you feel it when you do this? Do you feel it when you do that? That's what you come up with next. Where does my foot go? It's like, wrong question. Where's the target area? Right question. What are some variations? That's the right question. Move your foot around. Find it. Find it. Okay, keep it there. Maybe you got to hold it. Maybe you got to get a strap around the foot so that you can keep it there. Because otherwise you relax and it might just flop out of the place because the tension pulls it out of place. So we don't necessarily go to our skeletal predisposition. Sometimes we want to, that's how you put stress in your bodies, to go out of your predisposition sometimes, right? Of the bones. And then the last one's about rebound. After stressing a target area, it's important to relax and feel it. And it also, this last line of number 12, it is accompanied, this is the rebound, is accompanied by pleasant feelings of physical ease, emotional calm, and mental stillness. This is the discussion we were having yesterday, the physical, astral, causal aspects that we're approaching. And that's the Yin Yoga Sutras. All right. So what I'd like to do now, if there's no questions about anything thus far, is start touching on a little bit of analysis on archetype. I don't know how far we'll get, but yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go to that.
Stretching behind the knees. So I have always, looked for long bands of sensation between the sit bone and above the knee, versus don't look for stretch behind the knee. What are your thoughts on that?
Sounds legit to me. I'm good with that.
But if it's all connected tissue.
Yeah, in the end, you always got to say, this is a general rule, and all general rules have a point in it where there's the opposite element being true. That's the yin and yang theory. Anything you can say absolute, that's got to be wrong somewhere. But I think that sounds like a good, but again, just like when I was saying about if you're going to teach precisely with anatomical terms, you're going to talk forever. If I'm going to talk about every possibility of something going wrong, that's going to go forever too. So you just got to think about, most people, this is true. Most people, this is true. And if it's not true for somebody, it doesn't sound like you're really putting them in harm's way, So that's why I just generally say, look, sort of small sensations are not good, which that's an absolute statement. There's no way that can be true all the time. I can feel it in my own body. There's been time where it's just like, God damn, I just feel it right there. I just know that's the right thing to do though. And I feel better now because there was some sort of sticking point. So there's got to be places where even that can't be true all the time. But I still say it because mostly I'm sure that 99% of the time I'm going to be helping people take care of themselves and avoid injury. So we can't be perfect, but anyhow, all that being said, that sounded pretty legit. Yeah.
Can you define archetype again?
Archetype is not pose. An archetype is sort of a category of variations. That might be another word, a family, we could call it, is a family of poses. It's not the pose. We use the name of a pose to designate. That's why it's an archetype. We're saying saddle pose is kind of the archetype of back bends. So we say the saddle archetype. And then one of the variations of the saddle archetype is the saddle pose. That makes sense? And just like, and then, because otherwise it'll get confusing when it's like dragonfly is the archetype, because that position, just looking at it, it makes sense. That could really potentially stretch the inner thighs. But it doesn't stretch the inner thighs in some people. The dragonfly pose, I should say, doesn't stretch the inner thighs on everybody. But the dragonfly archetype does. That's actually absolutely right. And then that's the thing. And then if you're talking about just yourself, then you could be like, what, dragonfly pose, it's not a variation of dragonfly archetype for me, but it's still there for the rest of your the population that comes to you as an option. Just because it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean it won't work for a lot of your students. So, right. Yeah, sometimes, right? Sometimes you're the weird one.
So with the archetypes, it's not a yin pose unless it's within those archetypes.
Well, the archetypes, remember, there's two archetypes that are yang. So we have the dragon archetype and the dog archetype, which are specifically, I'm either being dynamic in my upper body or bearing weight in my upper body, and that's a dog. Bearing weight in my lower body or dynamically moving, fluidly moving in my lower body, that's dragon. So yeah, I don't know if that touched your question. Maybe I didn't understand your question perfectly, but and then all those, the other five, the first five, those are specifically yin. I can take most of those yin ideas, those yin archetypes and the shapes that you might come into, and I can probably turn them into yang. But then you would have to say, well, that I've now just shifted. Like we, again, this can be a confusing one too. It's like we're doing dragon pose, but this is yin because I'm relaxing. So therefore it's a saddle archetype because I'm stretching the front of my body, possibly back bending if I lift up enough. So it's a saddle archetype because that's the saddle archetype is a yin archetype and I'm doing yin work. But the second I engage that hip flexor and lift that knee up, now I just shifted to the dragon archetype because dragon archetype is a yang archetype where I'm bearing the weight in my lower body. Does that help? Okay, cool. Yeah.
So
Unnormal.
never having done dissection or anything like that, I don't know how much stuff goes outside of the skeleton. If Norm was a real person, how tall would they be?
That's a good
I'm
question.
trying to figure out, is Norm a short person? Is Norm an average size person?
I think he's an average sized person. He's a little shorter than me, I think.
Okay.
My sitting bones are on heels right now, so that means his sitting bones are here. So we're there. I'm a little. Maybe he's taller than me. I don't know.
Where the head goes.
I don't know where I'm supposed to line him up. Yeah.
So maybe ish about your height.
Yeah, I think he's a little shorter than me. Oh, well, I got to be careful about that. Oh, I'm glad you asked that because, oh yeah, this is an important thing we haven't discussed. Because the proportions, because yeah, the proportion of your legs to your torso, this is crucial. So yeah, I have no idea how tall he would be if he was standing up. He might be about my height or a little smaller if we had the same length of legs.
Oh, that's not his leg.
Oh, well, that's his leg.
See, now you know.
Well, now you know. So there you go. But it is an important discussion. How long are your legs compared to your torso? How long are your arms compared to your torso? That's what I mean by proportion. Within your own body, what are your proportions like and how is that different than my proportions? That's going to change our shapes too. That makes sense? So like if you, oh yeah, I haven't been looking for this. but just, but I bet like, you know, I don't want to, sorry if I start making people feel self-conscious here, staring at your 14 skeletal segments as I look around the room. But, you know, like Camilla, right? Camilla, okay. I'm saying with some sort of accent or something that's unnecessary. Like Camilla, Camilla. She's like, just Camilla. If you sit up, do you mind? Like, look how long her torso is, and long her arms are, and her legs. Look how long those legs are. Where's your pelvis start? Right here? Yeah, actually, her torso is sort of long, but her legs are long in proportion to her torso. Is that an accurate statement, you think? Yeah, she's got long limbs compared to her torso. And I bet we'll find somebody in this room, and this is always a cool thing to do, if we can find somebody in this room has a similar size, a similar length of the torso as Camilla, but when you stand up, she's like over you. That's always a trippy thing to see. So we'll find that eventually, and you'll see it, and it'll be awesome. The arms are easy, a little easier to show. What if you did this? Let's see if we can do this. If you, let's pretend like you're doing a headstand, right? So that means that your forearms, I want your forearms to be level to the sky. So when you do this, don't do this, don't do that. Try to feel, are your arms level to the sky? And then I'm gonna look around. And yeah, this is the easiest one to go through is Camilla there, because we already know there's probably other people too. But yeah, if so Camilla, do you mind if I touch your forearms there? So already her arms are over her head. And can you bring your shoulders off your ears? Yeah, but keep these arms down as if you're in a headstand. No, 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 like this. But just shrug the shoulders up to the ears. Now look how high they come. She's way over her head. And then she descends so that my arm touches her head, which is actually, is that as far as your shoulders go down? It's actually hard for her to touch the floor with her head.
It's hard to do it. It's like everyone's like, put your arms together. I'm like,
She's shrugging. Do you understand? Do you understand what she's saying? She has to depress her shoulders so aggressively because her arms want to hover above her head. She would much, her body's like, she's built to be in a forearm stand.
That's why, yeah, I can't do, they're like, bring your arms together.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Exactly. Okay, that's cool. Thanks for clarifying that. That makes sense. She's saying if you tell her to put her elbows in, you're asking her to lift even higher. Now she has to shrug her shoulders down aggressively. She has to bring her elbows out. So she's not even going to get that pressure of her head on the ground. And other people, and I do it again, and some people are the opposite. They can't get those forms above their head. Oh, how apropos, maybe the other Camille. No, you're above, but can you bring your shoulders down? Yeah. Yeah, this is different. So the proportion is different here. She can bring her arms down, and now I'm touching her head, and now get me off of your head, and now her shoulders to get where the other Camilla goes. Like this is just like standard issue for Camilla. She can't help but do this. That makes sense? Pardon? Do it again. It's just the Camilla. Maybe that was enough. Does that make sense? Maybe it's just the bun that's throwing me off.
A lot of bun.
It's a lot of bun. So can you bring your arms up more? Oh yeah, even more so here. Can you even touch my arms?
If I go like this.
Can you see those of you in the back? Should we need to bring her in the center and show? No, you get it? She can't touch my arms. How's headstand work for you?
It doesn't.
Does that make sense? That's a prime example of what I'm talking about. Her arms can't get to the floor. If she's in a headstand, all of the weight of her body is in her neck. Ooh. And Oh, see, now I'm bringing up traumatic things. So terrible. Absolutely. And that's when you just got to start talking about, we have to get into it right now, but are there props that could help out? Is there some way that we could make her arms longer by using props? Yeah, sure. It's not what this course is about, but there's ways that we can help both of them in different ways, potentially, with propping. Makes sense? And also just the sheer fact of balancing. The balancing is difficult. The best balance that you can get is if it's somewhere in between what we've seen, because then you can move your shoulders, because balancing is always about subtle movements, constantly kind of falling, constantly correcting, to where it's no matter who you are, even if you're in Cirque du Soleil, that's what you're doing to maintain your balance, is you're just doing these little rocking movements, tiny corrections constantly. So if you have the bones for it, the proportions for it, then you can have that little mobility going on as you're rocking back and forth and finding your stillness, your as close to stillness as you can get, at least. Yeah. Cool. Proportion. It's a big deal in how you ultimately come into the form that's your own. So, and then we'll circle back rather than me scouring for the legs, people. It's a little harder to find, but we'll look at that later with the length of the legs. But now let's shift gears and let's talk about just let's do a little talk about our first archetype, the shoelace. And I'll blend it in, actually. Sometimes I do these trainings, just specifically on a couple archetypes, and we just really go deep into the analysis of for certain archetypes. But I don't know why I'm putting that back on. So here we go. Feel free to come over closer if you need to. You can sit in the middle if you need. Just make sure you're not in front of anybody. Can everybody see me okay with Norm? It's going to be hard to see, maybe. So if Norm was laying on his back and doing a shoelace on his back, he would draw his knee into his chest, toward his chest, and then he would bring that foot this way, right? Because he's rotating his femur. So that's what you do in a shoelace. One of the things that you do in a shoelace archetype, and almost all of them, is that you rotate the femur externally. Everybody cool with that's external rotation? 6 movements of the femur: flexion, extension when you bring the leg behind you, abduction when you go wide, adduction, a deduction, right? There's abduction. It's an unfortunate pair of yin and yang terms, ab and adduction. Everybody messes it up, no matter, all the best of them even. So that's why they always say, whenever you hear an anatomist who's been at it a long time, they always just say adduction, abduction. That's what that means. So abduction as an abduction, abduction, a deduction, flexion, extension, and then rotation and rotation. So what you do in a shoelace archetype is you externally rotate. What the hell's going on? You externally rotate and you flex. That's the combination that stretches your outer hip and your glutes. That's the basic, most basic analysis of a shoelace archetype. So when I say that you have to flex, I mean from this point, right? The anatomical, the Western anatomy, right? Anatomical model of a human is like this. If I was standing like this or laying down like this, to bring my knee toward my chest from this point is got to be a flexion. And then I rotate. So the combination of those two things is what will stretch your glutes, will potentially stretch into the hip rotators deeper than the glutes. And also then since it's going to stretch the glutes, it means it might move down the IT band. Now you know what I mean by that when I say your glutes go this way. That tissue continues down because the glutes, it's a continuation, that tissue is. And that's how you do it. Rotation, flexion. The question is, how much of those things do you need to do? How far do you need to externally rotate? How much do you need to flex that femur? Well, that starts with what are your skeletal shape like? What's your skeleton like? Make sense? Because I don't know if your hip socket's this way, that way, down, or up. If I rotate too far, I've said this before, but now we can look at it on norm. If I'm stuck, if there is a compression, or if there's too much tension, it doesn't matter. The boundaries of your body are tension or compression. Either way, the femur is not going into any more rotation. The effort to use your tibia as a lever to continue rotating it, that's why people hurt their knee so often in shoelace archetypal asanas, is because of an attempt to over-rotate the femur. We all down with that? Stuck. I'm going to keep going. Ouch. Right? So here it is. Think about it. You go into your shoelace, and so here's two of them we can think about: the loose shoelace or the untied shoelace. Do you see the shift that I just made in the femur bone just based on where my foot is? What am I doing to my femur when I go like this? I'm rotating it out. That makes sense? Externally rotating that femur to get that foot up. And I place it on my knee or on my calf. Now I'm forcing it to stay there. If it doesn't want to stay there, if I'm starting to over rotate, it hurts my knee, or this happens. And this is my pose. And you see people like this, I'm falling down. Why am I falling backwards? Counterbalance, and the femur is pushing into my bone. It's compressing me. So instead of it hurting my knee, it's not hurting my knee because the pelvis is shoved backwards. So instead of hurting my knee, I'm just falling down. And then if I do this, less rotation. And that's why for so many people, that's so much better.
Is there a specific place that you may feel if you have that tension or compression when you're over rotating your femur and your hip socket? Is there a specific place you typically feel that, or in your hip socket? Or
Maybe. You might feel it in your hip socket. Some people do, especially if they're sensitive in that space already for whatever reason, maybe because they've been grinding into that bone for years. So that happens. But typically you feel it in your knee. That's why you feel it in your knee, because you're twisting your tibia out of place. Or again, you feel it. It's oftentimes though, you don't feel it because it's deep and the compression is unfelt, and maybe even just squishing into some gel rather than really digging into the bone or hitting a nerve. And then I'm just like this. And then I'm just like, oh God, what's going on? I hate this. I suck at yoga. And that's just what you leave it with. So yeah, you feel it in your emotions.
You see the guy or girl in class, right? And they're like this, right? They're kind of balancing.
Uh-huh.
I just fewer suggest breaking the shoelace, opening, see if they can get more healthy range of motion in their fingers.
Well, now you did two things. You brought the foot down. That means a little less external rotation. That could have been it. But I think you also went a little wider, right? Yeah, you went wider. So what happens there? So that's the other aspect you got to think of. Do you go wide or do you go narrow? Because if your hip socket's further lateral, then it's possible that your rotation is gonna go more. You might get more external rotation if you put the leg back where it's lined up. Does that make sense? The alignment is different for everybody. So you align your hip up more appropriately for some people by going to the broken shoelace. That's the one we didn't talk about, but it's in some of those pictures of my friend Jofi there.
Can you lengthen the other leg that you're not working on, that this upper? I mean, would it be a bad thing to go here for some people, or should it best be just lengthening things out?
No, that's cool too if that works. I never really thought about that. Oh yeah, it feels good.
So as long as we're addressing
Got a new
that
pose
part
now.
and kind of staying in the external rotation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay.
This is the Rachel. But what's that? Yeah, I don't feel it a whole lot. What I feel is more is kind of a hamstring stretch as well, because I'm also doing a half butterfly, just shifting my chest over here. So I'm getting a little hamstring stretch. I don't feel much of a stretch in my hip, but I can imagine somebody feeling like that's pretty good. But usually what happens is you swing that leg back and now you're in swan. So that's often what happens. Or even just bend the knee like this, because once I bend the knee, I take some of that stretch out of the hamstrings, and now I'm in a version of deer. So it's pretty close to the same. You're just keeping the leg straight, more like a butterfly, half
Yeah.
butterfly.
So you're just looking for whatever stays within that archetype that is able to keep them in that archetype versus going to another archetype then. If the actual like shoelace doesn't work. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you're still in the archetype. If I'm doing swan or deer or laying on my back to do it, all that's within the shoelace archetype. As long as I'm hitting the target area, that's all I'm really trying to do. I don't care about anything else really, except for target area, without hurting myself. So, but first, let me just come back to, before I lose it, is the wider leg, the broken shoelace. That's this. If you haven't looked at those pictures yet, we've done tight shoelace, loose shoelace, untied, and then broken shoelace is like going a little wider or just bringing that foot forward. And in going wider, again, if your hip sockets are set further lateral, it's possible that that's all you're doing is you're just trying to find a way to get out of that compression, right? That's just all that happened with your person who felt that was better. They were compressed here, narrow when they're externally rotating, but for some reason the hip socket allows more rotation when they go out. And it's not about getting more rotation. I don't care if you're like this, by the way. I don't care if you're here and having to lean back and you're like, oh my God, that hip is stretching deep. That's fine. You've done the job, because this is not rotated very much. This is very little external rotation, but it is flexing. It's flexing aggressively, pushing into my chest. Even if I'm leaning back like this, it's flexed. That makes sense. And it's those two things that you need to do in a shoelace archetype. Now, the opposite of going wider, this is why some people, they would rather go narrow, because their hip sockets maybe are set a little bit more forward and the rotation is easier for them there. And now suddenly I'm sinking forward instead of falling backwards.
There's somebody online that asked about, are there specific things to know about if working with an obese or a pregnant person in regards to maybe these archetypes?
Well, again, it's going to be, like I said, if I have more tissue up here, then I'm going to find compression of my belly against the thigh. I mean, and that's, you know, I mean, when it comes to that, when it comes to how large is the body, our principles are all still the same. We're still trying to find the target area. You're still dealing with compression, whether it's deep in your hip socket or just the tissue, the adipose layers that are pushing against my body. As far as pregnancy goes, again, similar in the sense of, well, now I also have a big belly here that's in the way of me being able to move. So that's just what you got. That's just what we're working with. Each individual is always going to be unique, whether it's just a hip socket, strange hip socket thing, or it's soft tissue stuff, or a baby in my belly. You know, the question of, is it okay for a pregnant person to do yin yoga in general, just about the safety of the pregnancy, is a different discussion. I don't know if they're asking about that, but I just brought it up, so I guess. And now it's out there. We got one pregnant person in here.
She said that after a certain point to really avoid formal pose or any kind of compression, not just because it's uncomfortable, because the based on where the placenta is attached, like it can be problematic. If I'm remembering correctly, in our series, the forward fold will like bracing against the wall and not completely going forward. So sort of like toes twist, avoiding the after a certain
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, coming from somebody who's never had to go through that, who's never had to go through that, has made it sound terrible, who's never had the privilege of going through that, who's never had the honor of going through that, it's probably a better way to say it. Yeah, just somebody who's discussed it with plenty of people who are pregnant, who's come to the trainings. And I'm always concerned about people being too concerned, not that this person is, I don't know them, maybe their suggestion sounds like a good one, something to think about. But I will say that with pregnancy, there's so much fear-based directions around pregnancy, as if you're incredibly delicate, as if this baby is like the slightest thing is going to cause a problem. It's just all, not just yoga, it's all over in our Western culture of easily getting sued for anything, that everybody's afraid of, like, I don't want to be the one, because, you know, in pregnancy, we're not sure if the pregnancy will be viable no matter what. And then if it doesn't happen, and then you're the one that gets blamed, like, it must have been that pigeon pose. And it's like, you don't know, it could have happened anyhow. But I will say, I think that can be, whether it's pregnancy or anything, I think being over concerned, being overprotective, I think can also be damaging. And we have discussed this with a lot of people in pregnancy who have been through it and done their yin yoga. And look, we've known a lot of people who do. They just rest there on their belly and it's great. They just use like a bolster, like, oh, that's cool. They're not pushing hard. Again, it's yin. We're not like, We're just like resting gently. And I know that there's a current, and then I don't know about what you just said. That sounds all interesting, and I should look into that deeper as far as about the placenta and all that stuff. But But I know that this idea that you are now, I know that suddenly the tissues are more elastic and they can stretch further. But I think, you know, I think the best thing to say is like, just go lighter, just go gentler. Doesn't mean you shouldn't stretch. I don't know, it's a hot topic. All I can say is the one thing that we did get, which is unsurprising from all of the different people we've discussed who have done their yin yoga throughout their pregnancy, is that every pregnancy can be wildly different in the reactions to the you know. I know that, and then I've heard, because it's a thing now, I've heard the opposite, and I usually say the opposite. It's like the early stages where you got to be more careful, and after pregnancy is when you got to be careful, because you're still, especially after, because then you still got some of that elastin to you, and now you're mobile, and then you can overstretch potentially. But anyhow, I don't know. That's what everybody should have said.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think every body is different. And I think about what I did when I was pregnant. I didn't know I was pregnant for the first few months, and I was running 5-minute miles on a track, doing Ashtanga every day, and somehow my son survived. Okay, he's here. And but I think that you're right, that there's a lot of things that maybe we can optimize something, but there's got to be some intuition, and everybody's going to be different. And so I think as a mother, when you really tune into, or as a childbearing person, I should say, you tuning into you, and if you feel like something's a bad idea, even if it's indicated for pregnancy, maybe in your situation it might be a contraindication because you feel that, and vice versa. That would be my opinion. Yeah.
You ever see the movie The Business of Being Born? You ever hear that? That is an awesome movie. It's pretty fascinating. It's and that's where there's a lot of that in there. The Business of Being Born. You've seen it? And it's like, your mind is blown, and you're just like, the whole system around assisting births is so fear-based. It's like, lay down and let me just cut you open, let's put you out, let's just do this thing to keep you safe. And it's like, that's not right. It's like, you know, it talks about a lot about that, about the Western fear-based medicine around pregnancy, and how it's a commodity. The more I can tell you to be fearful of something, there's money to be made. And that goes not just for pregnancy, that goes for everything. It's like, the more I can get you to be afraid of something and then let you know that I'm the one that can keep you safe, there's a lot of money to be made. So anyhow, that went way off track. No, the question came up. So, but shoelace, I want to get this analysis down. How is that so far? Simplest shoelace is you got to externally rotate and you got to flex the femur. The question is it better to bring your leg wider? Is it better to bring your leg more narrow so that your external rotation, whatever degree that it is of an external rotation, is sufficient for the job? Your external rotation is better, wider, or narrower for everybody. One more thing about this one though, tight shoelace. When I go narrow, do you also see what happens to my rotation? This foot goes way down to the floor, the knee goes up higher. I lose some of that rotation. So some people like it narrow, but then they want to put a block underneath, exactly, a block underneath their foot over here. Ow, I'm hurting myself. That is too much for me. Now I know. Cool. And then there's swan, and this is where we were going over here when Rachel asked, well, what about this? If I stretch this leg out, but keep this one and go over it. It's like, yeah, that could be a good thing. But in swan pose, in deer pose, we swing this leg back. And then we have this movement. I bring the foot forward, or I bring the foot back. What is that doing? I show you here. Your tibia has 4 movements. It extends, it flexes, and it has a little rotation when the leg is bent. That's when the ligaments go slack. That's when where the bones are resting here on these facets, it just slides in there. So that's a natural movement, totally good, totally safe within your personal range of motion. Some people can go wide, some people can barely do it at all. But what it can't do is this or this, right? There's no abduction and adduction in the tibia. Make sense? Why am I even saying that? Is because of this. It helps us understand this. If I'm sitting on my heel here, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to go into a swan pose or a deer pose. So that means that this leg is going to have to go back into extension. And I'm going to bring this tibia forward like that. Except no, I just broke my knee. Yeah? So when you bring your foot forward, you don't do that. You do that. Do you see what I'm doing? I don't do that. I do that. You don't have to think about it. It just happens. Your femur externally rotates when your foot goes forward. Your femur, you lose some of that external rotation. I could say you internally rotate and be accurate, but then we'll get all confused. So we'll just say more or less external rotation, okay? That makes sense? Because we don't do this, foot forward equals external rotation, foot back equals less external rotation. The same is true when we go the other way. If I sit down, this is something you were bringing up, Alexis, is sitting down next to that foot. If I sit down next to my foot, femur has to rotate in. If I bring my heel away from my butt, femur has to roll in. If the femur doesn't roll in because it doesn't rotate inward that much, you break your knee. Some people, strangely enough, have a lot of internal rotation, natural to their body, and they can actually sit with their heel away from their butt pretty far, comfortably and effectively. Why would you ever do that? Well, we'll do it when we practice here pretty soon here, is that when we do, it's one of the few times where you really do it when you do a position like half saddle. I sit on my heel, I have no rotation. I sit next to my heel, you can watch your own leg going in. You can see your femur going in. If it doesn't, you are going to break your knee. There's a way to avoid that, though. Same thing here. If I do swan pose, if I do swan, I'm here with my pelvis somewhat level and the back leg straight-ish, and I want to bring my foot forward. That's a big rotation, too much for me. I don't know if you can tell. Because I'm barely balancing now and the pelvis is getting pushed upwards. So I'm not hurting my knee. This is one of those times I can feel it in my hip. It's grinding into the bone. I'm probably giving myself arthritis just to show you this. It's worth it. Totally worth it. If I let go of my foot without doing anything, what do you think is going to happen if I just let go of it? It's going to bounce. And then I just sank down because I just rolled into place. I was in compression. I was spring loaded. It pushed it in. I didn't pull it back. I'm not pulling my foot back at all. It just bounces back because I was pushing into that bone. It wants to go back to get into its spot. So there's another thing. So I can either let go of my foot and let that foot slide back, and then, you know, play with it like tiny, tiny adjustments until I get the good stretch, because it might go back too far, because it might just be part of that was tension. Part of that was tension pulling it back, not just compression. So I might, when I settle back in, I might grab the foot or something and hold it slightly forward. Or instead of pulling this foot back, I can do it up here with the shin level to the top of the mat. If I do something else, any guess? Think of a skeletal segment instead of a prop. What could I move? The back knee could bend, but more importantly, what just happened when my back knee bent? I just leaned this way. I just brought my pelvis that way. That changes the rotation too. When I talk about when I talk about any movement of the femur, I'm talking about it in relationship to the pelvis. So I can adjust my rotation of the femur from the femur itself by pulling the tibia forward and back, or I can adjust it by shifting my pelvis around the femur. Is that confusing enough? I can rotate my femur externally that way, or I can rotate it that way. I can reduce the rotation by going this way, or I can reduce the rotation by going this way. That makes sense? The relationship between these bones is what equals a rotation. If I didn't have a pelvis, rotation wouldn't make any sense. It's just a bone in space. I have two bones to make this joint. So when I talk about the femur moving, I mean femur's moving within the pelvis. So I can rotate this femur this way, or I can rotate the femur this way. Is that hurting? My femur, if I'm rotating my femur externally that way, right? I'm going that way, out. If my pelvis also goes out, then I'm reducing that rotation. I'm going with it. If I did this, maybe if I just showed the extremes, right? If I'm here, right? And then I just go like that, I didn't do anything. Right? If I do this and I go like this, my femur's still put. It didn't move anywhere. So the rotation is less. That's more external rotation. This is less external rotation. This is more external rotation. This is less external rotation. Less, more. And then I could even do it the other way. I could go even more. I didn't move my femur. I just kept pulling my pelvis around this way. So it's externally rotating further. Super clear, right? Okay. That's why sometimes we dedicate a whole workshop or a whole training just to that. And then I'll have people drill it. And then I'll just be like, okay, what's this? What's this? What's this? And then eventually just see it. Okay. So we should probably take a small break. When did we come back? 2:30? It's already 4. So we went well over an hour and that was a lot of talking. Let's take a break. Thank you. Let's take a break, come back. I'm going to touch on a couple more little things about analysis of some postures, some archetypes, and then we'll practice. Sure.
So the Yoga Sutras mentions asana 3 or 4 times. So, there's a lot of emphasis on the body, whether it's yin or yang. How do you bring it all back to the bigger picture of yoga? How would you do that?
Well, I consider what Patanjali is talking about when he says asana, not anything like this. He's talking about this.
Right.
You're just sitting, keeping the body still, physical. Keep your body still. Sit upright, be still. So reduce your movements to a still upright position or reclined position, whatever. Go past the body. You got to start with the body.
So we're so focused on the body today in yoga. How do you bring it back to the bigger picture, the bigger purpose?
Subtilization. You start with the body. You always start with the body with yoga, or at least with hatha yoga is meant to be like its body, but it's meant to be leading in the direction of releasing from the body. So you have asana, and then you got pranayama, and then you got pratyahara. You're getting more and more subtle. So first I'm like in my body, and then I think a lot of what we're doing is a mix of stuff. There's pranayama even in this, and stretching and releasing and feeling the rebound. That's prana. I'm manipulating my prana by doing this. So that's what I mean by rebound. That gets us more into that bigger picture. To me, I do a posture, an asana. It's fine. I think it's fine for us to take that leap and talk about it in those terms too. These actual postures stretching us for asana, but I do that. I'm working on the body. I release from that. I'm still with the body, and then that's the physical astral causal stuff. To lead myself, my awareness into a subtler sense of my body until I naturally move into these subtler aspects like my astral and my causal being, and eventually out. Samadhi.
You're calling all those basically in relation to the koshas. You're going from the Anamaya kosha, which is the food body, and then moving progressively through the prana, through the nervous system,
Totally.
things, ending up in what would be the Anandamaya kosha, which is that really going to that subtle space where you're kind of blissed out of samadhi, whatever. But with the yin, you're basically addressing 3 koshas, and you're relating them to the Om, A-U-N, and going the external, internal, like the astral, causal, everything like that, until you go just to those spaces, which I think brings it all back to what you're asking, is how do we bring yourself together?
Yeah, the koshas are an expansion of the 3-body theory. So you got the 3-body theory, which I think is a little more old, and then you got the koshas, which expand upon that, and they're saying, okay, the physical body is actually this and this, and the astral body, it's different people say different things about. I can't remember what Dr. Mottiyama, my teacher's teacher, says about it, but he says something like that. He has a direct correlation where there's like, yeah, you're just expanding that idea so that we can, further refine it, deeper discussions. So I always like the 3 bodies because then it's just easier, it's super simple.
Yeah.
But I think that next level of discussion, we could go into the koshas and talk about, well, let's start splitting some hairs here and talk about other aspects that we're experiencing. So, but yeah, that's it. Yeah, same. You're right. I don't know. I'm riffing on that more, but what you're saying is right on. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's body. Even in chakras, it's my body. My heart chakra is this. I'm focusing on this thing here. But eventually my awareness of the subtleties of what I'm feeling takes myself into different places. And then samadhi is like when all, like I was saying, that's like in the Upanishads when they're talking about now I can experience my body fully, my physical body, but at the same time I can experience the astral, not just my astral body, but astral bodies. I can experience your astral body, my astral body, our causal bodies. We start to unite, supposedly. I haven't got there yet, but that's the theory. That's my hope.
Is this like the yin way of resolution, maybe?
Yeah.
The sweetness, but from the yin perspective, we're just diving out in a slightly different perspective instead of intense the whatever, they're going at it from a very divine feminine perhaps perspective, which then eventually will turn us back to the yang. If we're looking at duality, which in this universe we kind of live in this dualistic world, and we're milking it this way, we're milking it this way, and eventually it must turn into the other to find out harmonic balance. We're going so deep into that yin aspect of the world that we eventually wake up on the other side, perhaps.
Sure, and even, or if you want to talk about yoga chitta vritti nirodha, it's like, I think that what we're doing is also like, I am intentionally stretching this hip for my hip's sake, but when I feel the rebound, like we talked about it, maybe I start having certain emotions or memories or desires that come up. Those are the vrittis. And according to that theory, those have always been there. It's not like I made them happen. They were already there. The vrittis were always there. Technically, they weren't vrittis yet because I'm not aware of them yet, but they were there. They were vasanas then, I think they call them. They're melted. I'm making them, I'm bringing them to consciousness. And now I'm dealing with them. The latencies, the vasanas, yeah. The vasanas become vrittis. It's not a vritti until I'm experiencing it. It's not in my field yet. But I need to expand my sense of chitta. I need to expand my awareness within my chitta, maybe a better way to say it. But basically, I'm stirring shit up intentionally so that I can be aware of it. Because most of the stuff, most of my vrittis are, again, whether or not that's the right term at that point, but whatever. But I'm unaware of my vrittis for the most part. I'm not aware, at least in this conscious mind I'm using right now, this kind of mind I'm using right now, I don't even know even a fraction of the stuff that I'm distracted by, that I'm misidentified with. So yeah, whether it's a chakra or a gentle stretch that I lay back and feel, I think that stirs the vrittis up, and now I can do that. And that's why I think that's what pranayama is all about. So it's like infused, but like shining a light on what's inside, and then I deal with it. And the students have no idea maybe in the beginning that they're even doing that, but eventually, like I said before, sometimes it's gonna hit them. You stick on this path, maybe you're just here to stretch your butt, but sooner or later you'd be like, what the hell is going on? If we're guiding them in the right way, subtle, not pushing it down their throat, sooner or later they're gonna be like, whoa, something bigger is happening. And that's when it's got to be like, okay, let me direct you to like some of these theories. Let me direct you to yoga chitta vritti nirodha now, because you're starting to see it. So now you got some work to do. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. Then it can be like, well, if you want to go further down the rabbit hole to deal with this, then let's go. If not, you maybe you should decide, go see a psychotherapist or something and work on it, which is also, I don't mean that condescendingly. I think both could happen too. Like stuff's coming up and they're vrittis. So whether or not you're hitting them the way that Patanjali wants us to or not, that's the next step. So we're going to stir the vrittis up.
I think we're missing that in yoga today.
Well, I think it can be no, we can.
Physical practice. I haven't been to everyone's yoga class, so I can say. The duration of maybe 1,000, 2,000 classes that I've been in. And this is very little.
Yeah, and the danger is that if you stir your vrittis up and you're not working on them, you just get more attached to them than ever. Because then suddenly you're like, oh, my desires, these deep desires that I've been pushed down, now suddenly they're here. And now, oh my God, I want to be a rock star. I need to do this. I need more. I need more things. Because that's your vrittis are always just like more and more. I need things. And if you're not doing the work, then yeah, you can stir stuff up and get more attached than ever. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you got to kind of be careful with like that's why sometimes I'm like, cool, you're here to stretch your butt. Let's just stretch your butt. You don't want to deal with the Patanjali stuff. Cool. Where I'm not going to take you too deep because I don't want to mess you up any further than what you are. Because if you're not ready to do the work, then don't go deep. Don't do chakra meditation. Don't do deep work like that. You know, do other kind of work. I mean, there's always other, you don't have to do yoga necessarily, but there's golf, there's whatever. There's TV, there's whatever, there's internet. There's all sorts of distractions to help you bury that stuff deeper so you don't have to deal with it until after you're dead.
You don't have to deal with it until you're here next time.
Huh? Oh yeah, for sure.
There's somebody that asked, Maria asked about going back to shoelace. Have a problem. You're a shoelace. What if you have the problem and where you can bring your leg clear out and nothing happens? You feel the femur, like the femur just rotates. Like she's wondering if you just like sit that out, or do you try to go to a place where you actually find something, even if it's kind of contortionist or something behind it?
Oh, that's a good question. I should probably answer it to everybody because it's a question that often comes up. So thank you.
Yeah.
Maria?
Maria. Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. We'll get to that for everybody to hear because it's a question that comes up a lot.
Cool.
I have a question that might be like a silly question, but I'm genuinely curious.
Though that's my expertise.
Perfect. So is there like, so yin is like my favorite thing in the world. I actually teach yin.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm very excited to be coming. But is there like such thing as
Coming,
like
I'm here.
100-hour type yin training, or is it just like we kind of
Sure.
things where it's like here and there?
Yeah, I'm doing one. I'm teaching one right now for my Japanese students on Zoom.
Oh, I can follow you now.
And we're not that far into it. So yeah, I'm doing that online right now. So yeah, that exists. I don't know who's doing it. I used to do it with Joe Fee, who's the yogi in the pictures there toward the back. She and I used to work together in Bali yearly. So I'll probably do that again. So just save up your money and come to Bali.
I would actually like that.
Cool.
Yeah, you gotta look through their
Yeah, I got a deposit. At this place at the yoga barn in Bali. That's because the pandemic, and so it's just like, I guess hold my money for now. We'll see, maybe.
I just feel like there's not, maybe I haven't looked in the right places, but here in Utah at least, like I've done other trainings that are virtual for yin that are like, 60 hours or something, but there's not like, at least here, I don't feel like there's something that's like super deep and immersive, I guess. I was just curious.
Yeah. I don't know who else. I would assume somebody's out there doing those 200 hours. It does seem like not just yin. It does seem like the world of yoga has turned into these modules, right? That's what most people tend to like be able to pull off in their lives, and the immersions are not so simple to do. So, it seems like a lot of teachers, including myself, is just accommodated to, the market. But I like it.
That are like more like 200-hour trainings, are they virtual?
Well, right now they are. I mean, this is the first in-person thing I've done in 20 months. So since the pandemic, right? It's been like 20 months. So, but before that, yeah, we were doing those in Bali, and I was planning on, Jofi and I don't do that together anymore. We had just stopped doing that together. But I was going to go ahead and continue for sure. I love doing it that way.
So how is like really like want to do that? Like how like a website?
I do. I think it's got my schedule from 2018 on it still. So you can see I'm terrible at marketing and social media. I'm blown away that Rachel even contacted me. I'm like, how have you heard about me? Because you didn't hear about me on social media or anything. Otherwise you'd assume that I'm dead. So yeah, it was just like word of mouth. She was looking for a yin yoga teacher, and some people she asked had said, oh, Joe taught me here, Joe taught me there. So she reached out. So it was just fortunate. But yeah, I do, and I always plan on getting my website better. I did update it. It is updated. It's just joebarnettyoga.com. And I do, and you know, this pandemic it's not over, so we don't know what's going to happen. I ain't going to make any huge plans. You know, coming out here was even iffy, but here I am. It's all good. But we'll see what the future holds. If there's going to be more variants coming out that are spooky, that mean just, you know, keep us low down still. But you know, if things do get better, they are going to get better. But if things are getting better in the near future, then yeah, I'm all about it. I've been excited to do something in Tucson. I don't want to go to Bali anymore, to be honest. It's pretty, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's been a brilliant thing to be able to do, and a great place and beautiful people and such a phenomenal culture for so many reasons. But yeah, I'd like to stay home. And Tucson's awesome. And it's closer. It's going to save a lot of money. So yeah, I would like to do that in the nearish future. So yeah, let's just stay in contact. You get on my website, you know, you can link up there. So just sign up to that to be notified about things. I always think about it. Like, that would be a cool thing to do.
So like, let's say you're gonna do one of yours on there. So like, if we have gone on your website, subscribed or whatever, once you open that up, you know about it.
Yeah, you know about it. Hook up on Facebook, hook up on Instagram. I got those two things going. I know, that's why I'm so surprised Rachel found me. I'm like, nobody can find me because I'm terrible. But yeah, you can find me at those places. Yeah, just email me. Feel free to write me anytime. That's cool. Joe Barnett, Joe at Hotmail. I mean, that's how bad I am about the internet. I still have a Hotmail account I'm hanging on. Yeah, you too. Oh, sweet. Just can't let it go, can you? Joe Barnett, Joe at hotmail.com. Yeah, let's all link up. All right. Okay. Okay, it's been more than enough time, right? For a break, everybody's in here. Obviously, we're ready to go. Whoa, there's like a hard strike on this. And then there's a soft strike on this side, I think. Okay. So yeah, you got those pictures in the back of the variations. I think the shoelace archetype is probably one of the harder ones to try to really get. It's that rotation of the femur and all the different ways that you move that leg. It just seems like it's kind of hard to understand. So don't worry about it too much. I mean, the more important thing is that you've seen the variations, and if you embrace that idea that we're all different, and tension versus compression, we have to find our own way. And really, I think the ideal situation is everybody's in a different position. I mean, that's where I learn the most, is by watching students explore their own pose and then find it. And it's just a fascinating thing to like look across the room and just be like, wow, look how different they all are. And then wonder. And then you got to get your head around this, like 14 skeletal segments and 10 myofascial groups. Like the sutra says in there, when you learn to see the body as 14 skeletal segments, that's a step. And that can take some training of your mind to start seeing things like that, to start seeing people in 14 skeletal segments. Like when I was looking around, like, okay, proportions, oh, my legs, oh, interesting, okay. You know, that kind of stuff, you know? So you got to start seeing, so people watch, you know, it's one of the funnest things to do once you've really got that down. You just see different twists of the legs and you just got to wonder why do they walk like that? Is it a tension? Is it just a skeletal variation? I wonder what kind of shape they would come into if they did this posture. And so that's it. So this is a nice guide that my friend Joe Fee came up with for you to kind of explore the shapes. We've talked about tight, loose, untied, and now broken, and deer and sleeping swan. We've talked about all of those and some variations within them. And you never know everything no matter what. So when you get it, when you're doing it the best, like I said right in the beginning, students explore on their own and they find their own way. All you've done has been like, try this, this, and this, and then anything around that's fine too. Just focus on your target area. So it's not just, hey, anything goes. It's not just anything goes. It's here, target area. And don't hurt yourself. Go. You know, and with a little bit of guidance on that exploration. Because if you just like explore, and you're just like, I don't even know how to start. Well, let me get you started. Here's an untied. Here's a loose. Here's a tight. Yeah. Now look around for it. And that's it. So what I just did with the bones is just meant to be like starting to, you know, trying to help you see in the 14 skeletal segments. I hope I didn't do the opposite, because sometimes if you make it too complicated, you just kind of shut people down. So I hope I didn't shut you down too much. Your eyes are saying it all there, actually. Oh, okay. I guess I'm just a narcissist who thinks every expression has to do with me. So let me talk about something a little simpler then. Let's talk about, how about the difference? There's a major difference between those first 4 positions on the shoelace. Those are all positions that are named shoelace, and also the wall shoelace. So it just says tight, loose, untied, broken, but it's shoelace. And then deer and sleeping swan are also in the shoelace archetype family, right? That family of poses. The big difference between, well, not wall shoelace, those top 4, and then deer and sleeping swan, there's a huge difference. And that is the ability for your pelvis to tip forward. The ability for your pelvis to tip forward. The movement of the pelvis is probably the most important adjustment that you could make on yourself or anybody else, or make a suggestion of. The most potent adjustment that could be made is almost always the pelvis. Even a tiny movement in the pelvis can make a huge difference. So it's that movement of the pelvis that's almost always causing the effect on your legs, right? Whatever the pose is. The attachments to those muscles of that myofascia. So the attachments to the muscles into the bones, this still matters, even though we have a broader look at fascia now that goes more. But that's an important band of fascia, is that particular myofascial segment. And so when you move your pelvis, you move those attachments of those muscles apart or toward each other or whatever. So the shoelaces, the reason I can't move my pelvis too far forward is because the legs are in my way. I'm gonna come into a compression. It doesn't matter who you are, what your bone structure is like. If I have both of my legs forward, I can't get my pelvis level to the ground. That's impossible. My legs are in the way. That makes sense? I'm tilting my pelvis. I'm walking my sitting bones back, and now I'm stuck there. And that's okay. That might be plenty for a lot of us. That's a lot. That's already enough tilt in the pelvis. I'm stretching my hip fine. But if I let myself go and relax like this, I'm not tilting my pelvis over anymore. I'm now moving my spine. So that's the big difference. Those 4 shoelaces on the top, especially those first 3 there, now let's say all 4 of them, you're gonna get stopped in the tilt of the pelvis. Tensions or compressions are gonna stop that pelvis. And then, so I show you on Norm, I'm tilting my pelvis, and now it's stuck because it's resting up against the bones, or my belly is resting up against the thigh, and that's going to stop me too. But then I go ahead and let my heart come forward, my head come forward, and that's when I start to flex my spine. Now my spine is being pulled apart. Make sense? Stretching your back. That's why those 4 can also have a caterpillar archetypal effect. Caterpillar is when you stretch your back. How do you stretch your back in the caterpillar? You inhibit the movement of your pelvis so that you can let the counterbalance stretch your back. So there it is. That's it. So you see these spinous processes back here, covered in ligament, of course, if it was real. And they are, I'm sitting upright, and they're like that, a little closer together. That's what you got to see. What you got to see is the space between these processes. That word, I keep using that word, a process on a bone just means an outgrowth, right? So it's all the bones have different processes. This is a process or a facet. Those kind of words means there's an outgrowth of the bone. So these processes, these spinous processes, they have lots of tendons and ligaments, right, attached to them. So when they move away from each other, like that, that means that tissue is being pulled. If my pelvis goes forward all the way, they've not been affected. Does that make sense? So the bone stretch that comes up with those top 4 shoelaces is sometimes I also get a nice stretch in my back too. Well, if I don't want that, I've got to do one of 2 things. I've either got to put a bolster under my chest so my pelvis stops coming over, and right? And this might be the same. This might be the same tilt of the pelvis here and here. It's just that one of them, my back is rounding. So I just stop it somewhere. So I don't stretch my back if that's not what I want to do. Maybe I already did a whole bunch of back stretching already. It's like, I don't want that anymore. I'm overdoing it. So I inhibit it. Maybe I do want it. It's like, okay, I want that extra stretch, so I do. If I don't want it, another thing I could do is take one of these legs back. Because once one of these legs is back, I have more ability to move my pelvis. Asymmetrical postures, and these are asymmetrical because you got to do left and right, but this is even more asymmetrical because I'm getting this leg out of the way, and now I got all this ability to move my pelvis around to the side or here, and then I can really lay down on top of it with no stretch in my back at all. it's just all, so this can be for some people, if they can't feel that stretch in one of those shoelaces, it just might be because no matter what you do with your legs, if you have them both forward, because of your bone structure, that pelvis isn't tilting. And so you just got to tell them, forget about it and bring that leg back and try deer or swan. Cool. So yeah, hang on one second and then we'll get you.
So I just wanted, if you could go through the archetypes and just tell us what the target muscle is, so I know what I have.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I did that before, but I think I did it like in the class and I'm like moving fast. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for doing that. And then I'll get whoever was going to say something over there. So shoelace, glutes, and the outer hip. Glutes and IT band. We just say glutes when we do our myofascial dance, right? It's this. Yeah, that's the primary anyhow, right? There's other stretches we could talk about, but that's usually the primary. And oh yeah, we used to have a different order of things. Sorry, I need to redo this so it goes in the order of our proper dance, because it would normally be caterpillar next. But so caterpillar. Dang, yeah, I didn't even think of that through. Thoracolumbar fascia. In other words, low back, mid back. That fascia does that. There's a big tube of fascia. We just didn't have the time in that lecture. I already wore you out with the slideshow. Maybe we can look at it tomorrow. That's a huge, thick tube of fascia. It goes all the way up your back. And/or hamstrings, back of the legs. So that also includes calves, right? I say and/or because like I might just want my hamstrings. I might just want those hamstrings instead. I could even stay upright. There's, this posture is not in there. Maybe it should be. This one can be a nice one where I just sit like this. And so again, once again, maybe it's like today, I just don't want to touch my back right now. I just want to stretch those hamstrings. Understandable. So your choice on that one. Stretch your back, stretch your hamstrings, maybe both. That's why the archetype is caterpillar. Or you might call it Paschimottanasana, the full Western stretch, which means you would get the hamstrings and the back at the same time. But we say one or both of those. Oh yeah, sure.
I think I would just say these aren't in the order of the dance that you like to do. Is that necessarily the way that you organize the class, or is that just?
It just makes the dance easy to remember. Yeah. But we used to do the dance, yeah, because we used to do the dance like that for some reason. We'd be like, shoelace, saddle, caterpillar. I don't know why we changed it. So there you go. Now, so if we're going in the order of the dance, then we're bouncing around on this. So I do apologize for that. Because what would go next? Shoelace, caterpillar, dragonfly. Dragonfly is the inner thighs, adductors. And once again, you can see where some of those dragonfly variations also could be a backstretch. Which again, a reason why you might be like, look, we did dragonfly for the inner thighs, but look, everybody's stretching their back. Let's just focus hamstrings and the caterpillar sometimes. So anyhow, dragonfly, adductors. And then we go to twist, spine, twist of the spine. Twisting the spine is a combination of tensions and compressions. They call it shearing when you do both at the same time. It's like if it's pretty cool when when the disc twists, it goes like that, like you're screwing a lid on. And all those spiraling tissues are stretching, but you're also kind of squeezing them together. That's what shearing is. It's kind of like wringing out a towel, you know? And that's kind of the idea. Now that you got this idea of fluids, like you're pushing fluids out of it and it sucks back in. So sorry, so stick to the question. Twist is fine. But as we've seen, twist can be a lot of other things too that might actually turn into the primary. So sometimes the twist kind of breaks our model up a little bit, but that's good, right? Models always have these little falters in there. And so that's why, like today, was the open wing really a twist for everybody? For some of you, it certainly looked like it. You know, some people are like really twisted in the spine. And others of you, it's maybe just a deep stretch in your pecs, or that cattail might just be a big stretch in your calf, in your quads. That might be the primary thing for you.
Does dragonfly also include chest openers? Like, would that be like similar plank motion?
No, that's why I'm saying I think it depends. That's why I like that heart opener thing. I'm bringing that into I think of that as a twist archetype. Again, it's debated amongst even our small group. We have these debates, even with Paul. I'm like, no, that ain't right. What are you talking about? How do you call a banana a twist?
Does he just say, I wrote this? So
Yeah, right.
I created it.
Right. And I'm like, no, I know the Grilly system better than you. So twist is the twist of the spine. What's next? So that means we got to go to the front, and that's a backbender. Saddle is the archetype of backbendings, and backbends stretch the front of your body and pressurize the back of your body, or one or the other of those. Once again, it's either it's an and or on that one. Am I stretching the front of my body? Am I pressurizing the back of my body? Or am I doing both? Like, for instance, dragon, the yin pose, dragon, can be, for some people, there can be no back bend at all. You're just stretching that thigh. You're just stretching that hip flexor. And then dog, bearing the weight in your upper body. Dragon, bearing the weight in your lower body. Not just bearing weight, like dynamic movements might be the thing. You're being yang in the upper body. You're being yang in the lower body. Dog is upper body, yeah, yang. Upper body yang. Just keep it like that. Dragon is lower body yang. There's plenty of times where we see that we're doing a combination of these things. So don't feel like it's just one or the other. And also don't feel like, I think somebody, I can't remember, this just came up and somebody else asked this, and somebody always asks this. Oh yeah, that was during the break. Do my sequences need to include all of these archetypes? Absolutely not. No, I think that's a hard thing to pull off, to be honest. That'd be a long class. Not necessarily. We pulled it off. No, we didn't. We had to skip the saddle, didn't we? Even us. But that's just because I can't stop talking. You might be able to pull it off. You might be able to pull it off, and that's a great thing to do, because then you can be like, I'm going to introduce you to the 5 yin archetypes, and then you can talk about archetypes in a class or do a workshop. You know, it's a great thing to do workshops on for your students. So think on that. But yeah, sometimes it's nice for a normal class to be a little workshopy, you know, a touch of that. So you can do that, but you don't have to. Don't feel constrained. Like sometimes it's just great to like do yin and yang, meaning like I'm going to do inner thigh, outer thigh today. Today, it's going to be all dragonfly and shoelace stuff, just back and forth. In other words, you're doing deep hip work. So yeah, you can just nail that, or forward bend, backward bend, forward bend, backward bend the whole time. Caterpillar saddle. But it doesn't even have to be like that. You can just kind of bounce around. Yeah, that's the case. And was there another question? It seems like I've missed somebody over here at one point. Yeah, Crystal.
Allow you to compress, but what if you take the position of the pelvis? Meaning like maybe sitting on a blanket and so now the pelvis is pointing down rather than pointing up. Would that help you?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it tips your, exactly, certainly.
So it would not be as, you wouldn't compress as much or.
Well, or more, depending on your body. But yeah, it's a way to, it's just, the way to think about it is always like, look, I'm just moving, trying all these variations to try to get you away from bad compressions, away from bad stretches, and into the place you want to be. So it's all just about that. So yeah, and putting your sitting bones, not necessarily up onto the center of whatever you're doing it. Yeah, right up there toward the edge, because now I have something to fall off of. Yeah, and so that'll tip your pelvis over. Sure, you can reduce some of that and then put something under your chest also. So you're like getting that good deep pelvic movement or deeper one, and then something under your chest, certainly. But it's just that swan and that deer just takes care of it like that. But who knows? No, not everybody can. Those don't work on everybody either. And then, did somebody else have a question?
We said that the fascia is made up of mostly water. And so if we're hydrated coming into the eating of class, we're going to have a better cleansing experience probably, or is that a good thing to?
Yeah, I mean, being hydrated is always a good idea, but I don't think of it like that in those terms when it comes to this, because this is like the body's water. That's, your basic structure. I don't think that if you haven't drank enough water today that you've, really dehydrated the discs of your spine necessarily, right? It's usually like just sort of like more superficial. My skin, get kind of dry or something, but we're kind of like into those deep tissue that where your body is going to keep, like, if you need to lose some water, you're going to like get dry in your face or something first. You know what I mean? You're not going to lose that stuff in there. But yeah, so I don't think that you need to like drink an extra gallon of water or something coming in. Yeah, I'm sure it has something to do with the fascia throughout. I just wouldn't know what it was. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else? Did I get through the archetypes okay? Feel good about the basics? Excellent. All right, well, let's practice. Feel free, if you need to use the bathroom or something real quick too, we can take that moment as we set ourselves up to practice. That's everybody.
The dog and the dragon on target areas. Targets for these guys?
Well, that's the thing. Now you could extrapolate everything that we've done in here and see. That's what I was saying. We kind of short the focus on any yang stuff to just say, yeah, upper body work, lower body work. But I think if you really wanted to kind of geek out on it, I'd just kind of look through and be like, well, how does that relate to these other archetypes? I'm just doing it yang style, it could be an interesting thing to do.
But generally speaking, the dog is upper body and then the dragon's lower body.
That's it, right?
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, they have elements of the other things, like, this is upper body mostly, but now I'm also kind of back bending.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And so that's kind of saddle, but yang. And then down here, I'm looking at like, same thing with dragon, twisting dragon. I'm bearing the weight in my lower body, but I'm twisting. So yeah, you can ultimately bring these ideas of the first 5 and see how they, are aspects, how they have their yang, how they can blend into that. Yeah, so that would just be a much more, complex and look at it. So some folks like yourself maybe just like those, kind of geeking out on those details. So that's great.
Thank you.
Sure, sure.
Which archetype would you put hip flexors into? Like which ones, like is it just like they're kind of, it's woven
Saddle.
throughout? Saddle.
Front of the body stretching.
Okay.
So front of the body stretching means your quadriceps, your hip flexors, your rectus abdominis.
Yeah, I'm writing the balancing archetypes for everything to try to understand them in contrast to one another.
I'm glad you said that because I kind of shorted that on that description. I just said front of the body stretch, but yeah, I should probably be more clear.
Yeah, I was thinking about like how to sequence things, so, like some folks are very like
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all this like breaking out my kidneys so I can make more.
What's that?
It's like breaking to my kidneys so they can make more. Is that like bullshit?
You what?
Did I just make up like bullshit? Because I was like, why are they peeing so much?
Oh, peeing more.
Like, bringing out kidneys so much?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting thing. Maybe. No, I like it, but maybe there's.
I had a dehydration headache the first night. Like after, like on Friday night, like I went to sleep and I had a little bit of a headache, and I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll go to sleep. That fixed the headache. Woke up, still had a headache, which I think is just the most BS thing in the world. Like sleep is supposed to fix it. I was dehydrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know. If you're messing with your prana, that could do all sorts of things. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Oh.
Oh yeah, where people are trying to like turn on to the west, like eastbound.
Still got a green light. Oh, I still didn't answer the question. Maybe I'll answer it during the class. What was that question? Oh, just if you don't feel anything. Yeah, sure. I just think that sometimes the stretches are really subtle, and I think sometimes that's all you really need, and maybe even better for you just to let that be. You just don't have a lot of tension there, and then I would just tell that person to kind of let it be subtle, focus and see what you do feel, because you probably feel something if you really. Usually, I think it's usually it's like it's not that you don't feel anything; it's just that you don't feel what you expected to feel. Sometimes I don't know if it's this person's that's the case or not, but I do know that that comes up where they're just like, I see everybody else like groaning and moaning and his hips are dry or so intense for them, and I'm just like, it's nothing. But it's like, but you are just wondering why you're not groaning and moaning, and that your light stretch just seems too light to be anything. But maybe it's not. And other times it's like the other thing you said, it's really you have such open bones. Maybe you're really tight, and just like the ballerinas when they come to your class, it's just like you got to put blocks underneath their feet while they do their splits. You used to do that? Yeah. Ah. Yeah. Yeah, and it can be frustrating in normal class because the teachers don't want you to do that because they're like, you're going to freak everybody out, or they're so certain that you're hurting yourself. And it's like, well, the truth is it's just harder for people like you to scratch that itch, you know, you just can't quite reach it because it's,
Like even with my students, I keep demonstrating because they're like, oh, dad, we so I'll demonstrate and we'll go into it.
yeah,
So that they don't judge me as, oh,
yeah, yeah,
and yeah, just to try to really take into
yeah, 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 that's wise. It's good. No, yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's good. No, it's good. Oh, that was Canyon. Yeah, he's a good looking kid.
The poor child, like I told him, like, wow, you're and Gerald was like, I thought that he was gonna do something. So when you talk about
He's your baby. Okay, ready? Shall we practice? Oh, one extra thing to say. I was glad that Cami called me out on something. I was really detailed on where the target areas were in each archetype, and then we got the saddle, and I was like, yeah, stretch the front of the body, pressurize your back. But it's like, yeah, no, it's your quadriceps. So we should talk in terms of our myofascial dance, so that when you're doing that dance, you're like, oh yeah, this archetype. Quadriceps, hip flexors, rectus abdominis stretching, pecs as well. You know, sometimes we're just like doing that archetype thing. We're like rectus abdominis, and you see me stroking all the way up my chest. Like, that's not my rectus abdominis. What are you talking about? So all that tissue, that's why sometimes I'm just like, stretch the front. So it would be the pecs too, I guess, as I go back. And that gets tricky because it overlaps some of the stuff you feel in twists, I guess. But and then your back body compressing, meaning your spine. So the backside pressurizing. So the spine being pressurized, the discs being placed into a comfortable compression. Is that better? Is that okay? Okay, cool. Thanks, Canny. What's that? Oh, sorry. That's the quiet corner. Yeah, that's like that's the dead zone over there of sound. Quadriceps, hip flexors, rectus abdominis, and all the tissues to the front of the body here too, up higher. Cool. And then the back side of the body, pressurizing, meaning your spine, the discs of your spine ultimately being squeezed. Sure.
Okay, so we were talking about the squeeze that is the lid, right? So when it releases, what is the impact?
When you, and this is throughout the whole body, but the discs is a great way, as an example of this. When you squeeze those discs, twisting them like that or compressing them like that, you're pushing fluids out of the disc. And then you might say, well, that sounds like a bad idea. But the cool thing is when you release it, it sucks it back in. So it's like a sponge, right? The whole body is like that. The whole body, like you pressurize, you twist, you stretch, and it's squeezing fluids out of that space. But when you release it, fluids are coming back in. And this is something that's talked about in all the anatomy books too. When you, the anatomy of a disc, like bulging and herniated, the typical description of that is, rather than a violent force, right? That will give you a herniated disc. But when it just happens over time, it's because it dries up. It dries and it cracks. That's usually the process of a disc bulging and herniating. Well, why does it dry up? Well, because you stopped squeezing. Maybe it's because you stopped squeezing fluids out and pulling them in. Squeezing fluids out of your body and pulling them back into the discs tells the body to keep the fluids there. Does that make sense? It's that flow of fluids that tells the body that you still need that solution-like state within that space. If it doesn't have it, then if you're not doing that, then that immobilization dries them up. How's that? Sure. I don't know. Can you? We'll find out.
So like when you go in my mind, it happens to me. So is that tracked by the lymph system being drained out?
Tracked by the lymph
Yeah,
system.
like if it's brought out, like so old fluid is flushed out, new fluid, like fresh fluid is coming in, is the old fluid being exited with the lymph system? Sucking it right back in. Yeah, 'cause you
I
say
think
that it's
both.
releasing toxins.
Yeah, it's both. Then, yeah, there is an aspect of that for sure. There's toxins within the fluids and as long that's key. Just like, just like the rivers, if they're not moving, it gets stagnated and it gets polluted just by sitting there without movement. It gets gross, right? It gets toxic. But if it's flowing, then those toxins are flushed out. So yeah, same thing with your body. The river stops flowing inside of your body, you're going to build up toxins into the stagnant areas. Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I use the word stagnant, because that's in the Chinese medicine. You talk about stagnations of cheese and cheese and deficiency of qi. So yeah, it's getting toward the end of the day. Okay, ready? So ready. Let's try, how about we try the pose we have. I'm just going to throw some stuff in that we haven't done. It's just going to be a mix of whatever happens, to be there that's left. It's kind of like digging through the refrigerator. You're like, yeah, whatever is there. Huh? Yes. My friend in Costa Rica, my Costa Rican friend, said that they call it, that's a typical thing in his community to call it the rundown, meaning run down and see what's in the refrigerator. We got the rundown now. So what's left? Well, there's half saddle. So why don't let's do this first though. Here, I think a good idea, just to settle our energy, let's start somewhere like a rebound. Looks like everybody's already heading toward a rebound kind of position. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to get up now. Let's just either come into a seat if you want to do a seated meditation briefly here, or lie down on your back or your belly or child's pose. Or fetal position, right? That's a good one. Sometimes for the pregnancies, right? Especially as the belly starts getting bigger, they're going to need to roll over to their side instead. And let's take a moment here to focus on our breathing. So as I said on that first day, and repeated over and over, that an ideal, and that's the L is important there. The ideal is to release your breath completely, but that might take some work. That might take some yang breathing to get there. So you bring your attention down to your low belly and you exhale and draw it in a little bit. Pelvic floor might squeeze upwards gently. This isn't aggressive, right? And then the inhale comes naturally when you release. And you might expand even further. One of those breaths you'll release and then expand more in that low belly and hold it. Hold the breath, but not in your throat. Hold it in your belly and then sigh it out. That's the signal that you've held your breath too long, is if your throat starts to tighten. That's you're now kind of trying to close out your throat off to hold your breath versus keeping your lungs expanded by keeping your diaphragm distended. That's why I say let your belly get big. Pull your low belly in when you exhale, but relax and let it expand when you inhale, and keep it expanded. It's kind of like you're still inhaling, but you're not, right? And your throat's relaxed. Before the throat tightens up, you'll sigh it out, hum it out, or om it out, and you'll just, from that point, watch your breath. If you've been turning your head one way the whole time, maybe one more minute with your head turned the other way. And then feel the rebound. Feel the rebound of everything we've done in our study today. From the slideshows to the trying to fathom what this might mean if I had hip sockets further back or forward. All of this sort of critical thinking can really wear you out. You can feel the tension. I can feel it in my jaw and my eyes and my forehead once I'm home and I'm finally trying to unwind. It's natural. You should. Your eyes should get tired. Your head should get tired. Just like your muscles and your ligaments and your heart, you know, should get strained when you're exercising in certain ways. And in all of those cases, you got to give yourself a time to rebound here too with the study. So no more analysis. No more thinking about what other people do with their postures. You need to get back to that, but not now. Now you're in your body, nobody else's. Feeling your rebound of this day. And that's why it is absolutely legit for this class for you to do anything that makes sense for you, including lying here or sitting here the whole time. So you consider everything I say now as suggestions. But it's not teacher training time now. You're in your own body. You're taking care of yourself. You're just using me as a timekeeper and somebody to ask questions of if your postures aren't working out well for you. But when you're ready, if you'd like, then you can start to mobilize the body, possibly just by deepening your breath again, going back to that deeper yang breath work, or possibly by coming, you know, up and doing some of those finger fans and willows in the wind. We can return to that just because we introduced it today. So that might be something that you consider. tapping into again. See how that feels. When I inhale, I bring the pinky and then the next finger and the next in. All the while, I'm curling in my wrists and elbows and shoulders up. And when I exhale, I'm pushing forward or out to the side. So at first, I just kind of think about my extremities. Just want to move the arms, and then eventually you start to naturally want to move your spine. So when you feel your spine wanting to round and back bend, it doesn't really matter when it comes. Just let it happen when it feels like it's going to assist, right? The movement of those finger fans. The willows in the wind is when you bring one hand to the floor and go to a little side bend, and you decide how low you go. Maybe you keep the arm straight and keep yourself lifted high, or maybe slide the arm forward or bend the elbow. I gave you 3 ways to go into it. And twisting forward, twisting back, or straight to the side. It could be a combo, right? I see some of you just going right to that, where I come forward first, and by the time I complete it, I've rolled myself all the way to the back bend, and then maybe I'll even roll out of it the same way I came into it before I go to the other side. To get into the half saddle, if we choose to do that, you might want to, we're probably going to come into a dragon, a lunging position first. So on the way there might be a downward dog. Up dogs and down dogs if you wish, or all those things that you do with the legs coming up one after the next. Anything you like, even an inversion if you really want, before we head into it. If it feels like a nice thing to do, to go ahead and do some really yang stuff before we start going deep toward the yin side, feel free, whatever. Handstands, forearm stands. And then we're gonna step. No hurry, because you know I'm gonna do a lot of mobility stuff there too when you step that foot forward. The right foot forward would mean the left leg is the target area. The dragon, the yin dragon, is usually more of a hip flexor effect. Actually, I'm going to do the other leg because I don't want to bend that knee too much. But the half saddle is when you sit all the way back and not tipping forward because you're trying to stretch again the back leg. And you can do that. Some people even like to do that sitting on their heel because they don't want it to rotate that thigh. If you sit down, well, one thing you could do, can I borrow your block, is just sit down on a block, and then you could push your heel out to the side with the slightest rotation. internal. The idea is you lean back, so laying back is going to be difficult because you're a little higher, so that's going to put you in a pretty big back bend when you go back, but that's part of it too. Half saddle is both a quadriceps stretch, maybe a hip flexor stretch if you really lift that pelvis up high by sitting on something, could go up higher. And then a back bend too. It could be an asymmetrical back bend. Pressure could go in the back. You could sit next to the heel and you can lean. So just like from swan to deer, to reduce the rotation, I would say, you know, your swan could go more to a deer. Remember that part? Everybody was like, what are you talking about? Doesn't matter if we understand the bones, just that you know that you lean, and that might help you not hurt your knee. That's it, right? Whether or not we can describe that with the bones or not is less important. But some people lean to the side when they do it, even down under their forearm, because that's taking some of that rotation away. Some people turn the toes out to the side. That's going to rotate that femur in more. So leaning to the side might be necessary, but some people got that rotation and they turn that toe out and they lean back and there's no problem with the knee. And there's a great stretch in the hip, in the quads. Now, once you get back there, and I haven't set the time, I don't even know where the hell my things went. There. Once you get back there, if you get back there, you don't have to. Even right here could be a great stretch in the thigh. I know plenty of people, they just sit here, get a light stretch there, and feel good about it. But even if you're up here, here's an option. Here's a big option. Up leg, the lever leg. There's the target leg, and then there's the lever leg. I bring that foot to the floor. That might actually stretch the thigh more, for reasons we might have to look at tomorrow. Some people even grab that knee and pull it up toward them, which is going to stretch that thigh a whole lot more, especially if you're laying back. But you could do it sitting, right? You could do it up here or back here. So the lever leg, I could grab that knee and hold it and draw the knee out to the side or draw it in, or even cross that ankle over the knee. That sometimes is even more aggressive. Then I can push that knee down with that foot. It's fine, by the way, for the knee to come up. That's always a question that comes up. Do I have to keep my knee on the ground? No. You have to not hurt your knee. That's what you got to do. And sometimes that's preventing your knee from getting hurt, to let it float a little. You ready for me to set the timer, or need more variations? Here we go. You can stick with your dragon instead. Like I said, it's your choice, and you've learned a lot of options now. So if you're doing a completely different posture because this one's a bad idea with all of its variations, and this is one of those poses that tends to be kind of a bad idea for a lot of people, then you don't do it and you choose something else. You can bring the knees wider, by the way, and closer. Bringing the knee a little wider is going to reduce some of that stretch usually. Bringing it in tighter, it's usually going to stretch it more. Doing good over there? For those of you who do not want to do this half saddle, lay back into it like that, it's a lot of pressure in the knee to bend it that much, so it's understandable. You could always lay on your belly and do it the other way, right? Those of you who are in the pose, don't let me bother you. Just keep doing your thing, relaxing into it. I'm just saying, those who wanted to, you can kind of just sit back here and hold on to that thigh. Even a cattail pose cattail pose, you know, if you're doing it, if your intention with cattail pose is to stretch that thigh, then that's that. That's your a saddle variation suddenly instead of a twisting variation. Again, there might be a gentle pressure in your back. That's okay. Don't let it become anything too aggressive. One more minute, and it'll be 4 minutes in this pose. There's nothing special about 4 minutes. If 3 minutes is enough and you know it, then you'll just roll out of the posture and start your rebound early. Take an extra minute of a nap. Usually just rolling away from the folded leg, especially if you're all the way back in it. Just rolling away from that folded leg, and you can more easily slide it out and then lay on your back. Or sit, your choice. Rebound time. Rebound of sensation. But also maybe the rebound as you follow the sounds. Focusing on the movement of your breath, the sound of your breathing. So, of course, we can hear the class next door. We can sometimes hear stuff outside or people next to you moving about much louder, but that's fine. That comes, that goes. And you're focusing on something more subtle, the movement of your breathing. Maybe even listening for the beat of your heart. Listening for the breath inside of the breath. There's a Sufi poet named Kabir. That's how he describes God. Breath inside of the breath. You might want to straighten and bend that leg back and forth just to make sure it's still working. Yeah, still working. Okay, good. And then any sort of yang fluid movement you'd like to help you out of that previous pose. And then you'll go naturally and fluidly into the movements that will help you into the next pose. So that's that moment, that seventh phase of our yin pose. The yang is about that. It's about mobilizing the qi, the stiffness that naturally occurs through some parts of your body from being still so long in that posture. But eventually you're transitioning toward, lunging back and forth maybe, and you're dragging, preparing yourself to enter the other side of the half saddle. One side of your body is always exactly the same as the other. So make sure to do it exactly the same. At first, a couple of you looking at me like, wait a second, that doesn't sound quite the same. I haven't set the timer yet. I see a couple of you going in, but that's fine with me. You want a little extra time? That's cool. Especially since you can always just listen to your body and come out whenever you want. Sit back on that heel, maybe. That's cozy for you. You could stay on that heel and just lean back a little. You might even find a little like myofascial release point in there where my heel moves into that glute somewhere. If your proportions just line up to it. Or you sit next to the heel, maybe sitting on a block. Leaning to the side is an important option to offer. Turning the foot out to the side is totally legal as long as you're not twisting into your knee. It's not many people that do that safely, but some people do. Most of us would need to lean the pelvis away from the leg. And there's a lot of, and then you can set up props to keep you leaning that way. A couple of you have already figured that out. And then the arms up or down is an important one to think of. I've set the timer now. Kabir says, what is God? She is the breath inside of the breath. Another idea, another way of putting, you're using the sound of your breathing, the feel of your breath on the physical body as a path toward subtilization, a path in the direction of the astral breath. In the poem, it's like, it's as if God is speaking, right? It's like God's the speaker. And it goes, are you looking for me? Are you looking for me? I am in the next seat. My shoulder is pressed against yours. You will not find me in the stupas or the Indian shrine rooms, nor the synagogues, nor the cathedrals, not in masses, not in kirtans, not in winding your legs around your own neck, nor in eating nothing but vegetables. When you really look for me, you will see me instantly. You will find me in the tiniest house of time. You ask, what is God? She is the breath inside of the breath. One more minute. Sometimes people take that as a time to go a little deeper, you know, grab that leg and move it a little further. And some people take that as a time to readjust and feel it slightly more in my back. Or easing yourself out when you're ready. Settling into your rebound mode for a minute. There are times where you might choose to not try to go these deep places. It's important to know that this is a path toward such things, you know, whatever, discovering what that even would mean, the breath inside of the breath. Focusing on your breathing, even as it gets quiet, trying to hear it. Listening to your heart, it's directly related to your breathing. So shifting there is not a huge departure. But sometimes I just choose to let myself drift off, let myself disappear, kind of fall to pieces, at least my ego, right? As I lose all sense of who I am, even and where I'm at. Let that happen. I gave you a bonus minute there. I don't know. I was feeling the crowd, seemed like it was okay. After a little yang, we will go in the direction of a banana again. But this time, might I suggest that you try some props. Either a bolster under the feet or under your back. So that's what I offer as a potential exploration. Again, I don't care if you even do a different pose than banana right now. It's your time. I'm just the timekeeper. But if you are looking for that, you're looking for suggestions, some new things to try out for yourself right now, right? It's not selfish to take care of yourself necessarily, right? Everybody else who you want to serve needs you to be in a good place. So what I could do is place something under my feet, elevate the feet, and see if that doesn't help find that target area. So that's a slight flexion in the femurs. And then putting something underneath your pelvis would be the opposite for your femurs. It would be a slight extension. They'd be further back than your pelvis, behind your pelvis. That's an extension. In other words, a back bend. You'd be doing a little back bend during it. So just a consideration there. If anybody wants to try this big old square cushy thing, it's pretty awesome. Then don't forget the other day when we were doing, maybe it's yesterday, was it? We were also like trying to find a way to put something underneath like part of my ribs. So I kind of twist my body a little bit. This is one of those places, by the way, where you can potentially give somebody an adjustment with consent and walk away. I don't have to hold you. I can just grab your legs and pull your legs further maybe than what you can do yourself. So if that sounds like a good idea, I'm masked and ready. I'm going to set the timer right now. I'm going to let this one go for 5 minutes, actually. It seems like an easier one to go a little longer. And also, it's an interesting way with the energy curve to extend the time a little as you go on sometimes. So same with the rebound. Yeah, and try. Good. What I usually do is kind of pull you a little bit first, right? Like that, is that all right? And then I'm going to slide your thing here. Is that all right? Too much or more? Right there. Don't forget crossing the legs one way or the other. Which one's better? This one? You bet. Anybody else wants me to their legs a little bit? Try it one more. So usually I give a little pull. Now I'll slide your bolster here. All right. More, or is that good? Here? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, yeah, sure. Okay. Right there is okay, or does it lose it? Do you get more or less stretch when I do this? Yeah, I wondered. Seems like the way you're going to get more is if the upper body slides this way. This, but yeah, and then I'll slide this under you here. Yeah. You want to try? Pull. While I'm pulling, I'm bringing you. Is that working or no? Sometimes I get less from it, but.
No, it's working good.
Is that more? Too much? No, it's good. Okay. 5 minutes passed, but this is one of those postures. It's possible for some to go quite a bit longer. And I'm going to give you a couple minutes of a rebound. So you take a whole minute longer in the posture and still have a minute to rebound if you want to. little yang yoga. Very subtle yang. Unless, of course, as deep yin as this room is feeling like, some of us might be drawn to transform to a stronger yang. And then you're eventually working in the direction of the other side. So again, maybe there's some yang that helps you get ready for that. Willows in the wind is kind of like a flowing banana. So again, the options that I offered this time is to experiment with elevating the legs or elevating the pelvis, or both. I've seen people do that before. One of the nice things about elevating the legs is it helps keep them in place. Sometimes it might help keep the feet from sliding back. Socks are a little slippery, or the feet sliding on the ground. I haven't set the timer yet because I know there's still a couple of you finding your way. So looks like it's about time though. Again, there's not many postures where it's easy for you to actually help somebody into the posture and then leave them like that, but this is one of them. It's pretty easy for me to grab your legs. I kind of pull to give a little traction, and then I drag you even slightly and we communicate. I want you to tell me when is right. I don't know. I can guess, but please, you got to tell me that's too far, or please keep going, or so if anybody would like that, just raise your hand. I'll come over. See what I can do. Oh, that's cool. You use the wall pressure. It's good. Never thought of that. She's like, it's nice. Okay, so you relax. I pull. That gives the traction. Is that okay? Is it helping? Yeah. Okay. Too much? Too little? Tiny bit more. So bring the bolster over more. And then we can do that. Yeah, good. Yeah, where are we going? We're going this way. Full traction. You relax. I do the pulling. Slide the bolster too. Right there. Okay. Do you want them crossed? Do you like them uncrossed? Cool. Try. So you relax when I pull, so it gives you nice traction in there. Is that feeling good? A little more? Just a bit. There. Cool. Now, does it stay though? Sort of. There you go. There. Yeah. Is that good? It's working. Do you want more, or is it right there? That's one. That's the one right there. Oh, hello. Ready? The key is for you to relax while I pull. How's that right there? A little more. Right there. Oops, there we go. We're still on. Feel a little tension there, but maybe you want more, or right there. Want to try it? Which way are you going? This way? Okay. So you relax, I pull. Drag this over this way. Anything? You want more, or is that good? All right. At the spot or more? Right there. We'll give it a couple of minutes, so certainly no rush. I don't know if the sound of my singing bowl is getting lost. A little harder. We have time for 2 more postures. Here's what I suggest. Do anything you want to do. Sometimes that can be too much for people. But look, we've gone over these archetypes a bit. I can make some suggestions if that's really just too much pressure for you to decide what to do. At the end of our time with my teacher, when we would do those trainings, last day, the whole class would be that. He'd just sit up there and hit his bell, and you do anything that you needed to do. Because that's ultimately what we're trying to reach for, such an autonomy to where we could just practice together. I'm doing forward bends, you're doing twists, and we're all practicing together within the same sort of energy curve. So, 2 more postures could be 2 symmetrical postures, a forward bend and a backward bend. Could be a twist, could be 2 asymmetrical postures. Could be anything. Could be, completely different asymmetrical postures. Like, I want to do my right hip and then my left hamstring. Nothing wrong with any of that, because it's your practice, it's your body. You might need that. You might need that, a little attention on one side for something, but you're going to skip the other side for reasons that make sense to you as far as balancing that out. So I'm going to take my time on setting the timer. Just lost a few people to the bathroom. Yeah, like, what do you want to try out? I see a lot of you looking at the images. That's a wise thing to do. Is kind of look at them, think what you think. So, did you hear the plan? Maybe you left. What's that? Yeah, you got it. Okay, I didn't know if you left before I said that. Right, so here we go. We'll just do 3 or 4 minutes. I think that's about all the time we'll have. We're also going to have a little, a minute rebound in between. So again, if you need to be told what to do, I'm happy to tell you what to do. I'm all about that. So if you need to be told what to do, it's going to be a 3-minute headstand. I know, yes, at least a few of you are like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And I'm setting a 3-minute timer. And that's really fun for me and for you too. Once you have students who are with you on this, look, it only took us a few days. And I'm looking around the room and seeing the choices that you've made for your body. And I'm seeing frogs, I'm seeing a deer. Oh yeah, snail pose is one we never even touched upon. It's like plow pose, but better. She's doing it right. That's the only one I think in the Yin style that I haven't really approached much, at least in our pictures. I could be wrong, but there's all those wall postures too. Oh yeah, I see one wall shoelace happening. twist. Yeah, and I find that to be a really beautiful thing when you really see everybody doing totally different things, still working together. Like, it's like when you see those pictures of Krishnamacharya's practices, right? You always see people doing way different things. And yet still a sense of connection and support in our efforts to surrender. Releasing slowly from whatever target area you've chosen. A minute to move your body, a minute to transition out of the previous state of yin. But you're also transitioning toward the next yin. Again, if you did an asymmetrical posture, you don't even have to do the same asymmetrical posture on the other side necessarily. And sometimes I might even do the exact same pose. Do a pose, release and rebound, head into the exact same pose. These are all options. some of those, that gets a little harder if you're teaching a group class. You're trying to guide everybody and say, everybody do your right hip, and now everybody do your, a twist on the opposite side, and now we're done. It'd be kind of weird. But if it's an individual's practice, it makes total sense when you see that. That would be a possibility. I might not understand it, but it'd be an interesting conversation, I'm sure. And here we go. And, when you come into the posture, whatever target area it is, it's a mistake to think that you need to be at a very intense level of stretch. Sometimes it is the case, and it's good for you to be in such an intense stretch or pressure and relax into it deeper. You just know that it's good for you. You're certain of it. You can tell that it's at least worth the risk of it being too much. That's your choice. But it's also wise sometimes to check in on much more subtle effects. There was a question from somebody online about this, and I know I didn't answer it, but I'll answer that more fully later, about when you can't really feel much of a sensation in the target area. We'll talk about it more tomorrow, but all I can say is that sometimes it's a good idea to do that intentionally or to accept it. And sometimes it's okay to do a posture that looks so extreme compared to anybody else, just because you have a certain bone structure. You should never feel like you have to bring yourself as deep as most people go, at least in its appearance. And you shouldn't feel inhibited, right, from coming into a more dramatic looking posture than other people. If that's what's necessary. Just one more minute to rebound. Sometimes it's nice, of course, we might often think of the last Shavasana as being extended, but it's also fine. Like each one's just a minute all the way to the end. Brought it right up to the last minute. Thank you for your practice. Namaste. Om Tat Sat. See you tomorrow. Pardon? Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I was right behind your line of sight.
Thank you so much.
Would you be okay if I potted the pothos out there sometime? They're hilarious. I have a girl that wants to pot them, but she can't find any planters. Oh, I have tons of
Maybe you
plants.
guys can do it together. She's Spencer too. I'll connect you. Her name's Kate and she does our